Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to the Quantum Leap Podcast. We are so fortunate today to be talking with Amanda Jaros, and you might know her from A Kind of Magic. Is that the episode title? I think so.
Yes, that's the episode title.
It's been like 2 weeks since I watched it the first time, so I watched it 3 times. Very good episode, and I love the character you play. I want to talk about that, but before we talk about that, I want to talk about you. When did you first get the acting bug and want to start being a superstar?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know if I want to be a superstar. I first started getting the acting bug when I was really little. I would be in school plays. I would write and perform plays and make my cousins perform them on family vacations. I wanted to be a veterinarian or a zoologist because I love animals. And by the time biology and chemistry rolled around and I realized it was definitely not a strength of mine, my dad had actually said, well, have you ever thought about being an actor? And which is pretty rare for most creatives to be able to say, oh yeah, my dad suggested it. And I knew as soon as he had mentioned that as an option, I was like, oh, that's definitely what I'm supposed to do. I just thought it was something fun to do as a kid. I didn't realize it could be a job. So that forever changed my trajectory. But I had always been performing ever since I was little.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you get into it professionally? Like what was that like?
Oh gosh. Okay. Let's see. My first union job was on Criminal Minds. I had done some short films and, non-union things. You tried to just have experience on set. But Criminal Minds was, that first show where you realize you're on a big budget and it's a network television show and you're working with a lot of professionals. And I absolutely loved it. It was the job that happened to Taft-Hartley me, which means you go from being non-union to union, and it kind of changes the caliber of work that you end up doing. And I just had a heart for network television since then. So it was a great experience.
So I see that you've done some TV work. How did you parlay that into the role that we saw you in on Quantum Leap?
Yeah, the creative process is similar for most of my acting roles. When I examine any type of character, I like to do script analysis because I also have a background in screenwriting. So I will give all of the pages that they provide a read through and figure out that character's background and story and what's their motive. What's their objective? What do they really want from each scene or from the arc of the overall story? And what are their relationships like? How do they feel about those people or possessions, et cetera. So I go from that place to start. And then, if there's additional things like accents, I'll practice, pull one out of the hat. Most of my work is accent work, which is so interesting. I had a friend of mine say, on your reel, you have a different accent for every single role you do, which is pretty true. But I love it. So, that makes it more fun for me. Another thing to practice and to develop as an artist. So yeah, that's the approach I take with almost all of my characters.
I have to say, your accent work is amazing. We were convinced for a couple weeks that you were actually Irish, and then we started researching you, and then we saw your demo reel with another different accent. I was like, hey, and then we started looking, and then like, oh, born in the United States. Wow, she's really good at this.
Oh, I'm glad I convinced you guys. That's so sweet. That's such a great compliment for an actor that really has a heart for accents and dialects. So I appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
Well, if I can follow up a little bit on how you were describing your process about getting to know the character and finding out what the character wants. This was a very different episode of Quantum because it's as far back as the show has ever leapt. And we spoke to the writer, Margarita Matthews, who was telling us about the research that she put into creating the story, crafting the story, to do the homage and to actually treat the era with the respect it's due because of everything that happened in Salem. I was wondering if, because of that historical bent, did you do any extra research in figuring out your character, mannerisms, things like that?
First of all, I love Margarita. Her work was stellar. She was such a pleasure to work with. And unfortunately, during filming, she actually had to uh, bow out a little early due to the strikes. So we had her for when we started filming, and then we had to say, we'll support your script from here while she went to the picket line. So it's great you guys got to talk to her. But yes. So what I like to do is I will actually research the time period and the location that my characters live in. And so this I was a bit more familiar with because of plays like The Crucible that I grew up reading and watching. But you don't just want to take, someone else's creative liberty and have that solely impact your performance. So I just knew of that time period and what people were struggling with at that time. But then you end up doing historical research, which is a delight of mine. So yes, I did additional research as well.
Were there things that you found in the research that directly informed the character? Anything that you can point to?
Gotcha. So there wasn't one thing that I can recall that informed my character. However, I do remember something that made a greater impact was amidst my research, I ended up doing more of a deep dive on psychology, which is another thing I love to study, and the effects of a mob mentality and how difficult it is for someone to go against the grain, which is essentially what my character does. So that's something that stuck out to me versus more of any of the historical facts that I had already been somewhat informed of.
Gotcha.
That was one thing about your character in this episode that I really enjoyed. You seem to have a good sense of agency and like power for a woman back then, which was unusual, especially in that type of town in that era. And I was wondering, the backstory for your character, to me, like the first time I watched it, I was thinking, well, maybe she is a witch, maybe she is Wiccan. Then another time I was like, maybe she's just a scientist. Like, what is your backstory for the character?
Yeah, so it is what is presented. So she actually owns an apothecary shop and she is an herbalist. She is someone that appreciates using nature to be able to heal people, to be able to bring peace to people, whether with certain teas, flowers, etc. So it's interesting that she's so holistic, which I feel like is very popular now. But back in that time period, if you combine the right things, oh, you're a witch, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, it is. She doesn't have any ounce of witchcraft in her. It is just these false accusations that she has to navigate through, which she does do with some robust reactions. So, I liked her sassiness. I think when the character was presented to me, they said someone who is, let's see, some type of, I don't know if they use the word sassy, but Juliette Lewis, like, tells it like it is. And I just knew that this character was going to be fun. So, and she certainly was. So
awesome.
We already, like we mentioned, we spoke with Margarita, and I also spoke with Jet. She played one of the Mean Girls.
Yeah.
And she was telling us that things might have had to change a little bit due to illnesses on the set and like changing of schedules. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, sure. Hilarious. So let's see. We were a weekend, less than a weekend, somewhere around there. And there were a couple of positive COVID cases. And I don't recall having any interaction with any of those positive COVID cases. But NBC is great in so much as, they're following union guidelines. They're following, they don't want more people to get sick. So I appreciate any type of COVID protections that are put in place. I did test positive. I didn't have any symptoms, which was a godsend. Some people, once I came back from having to quarantine, they were like, was it a false positive? Which we don't know. Because I did end up having a false positive test when I got back. So that I had a positive, but then immediately a negative. So there was some confusion there, but I did the right quarantine and all of that. And no one that interacted with me ended up getting it. So whether I had it or not, we don't know. But it's always better safe than sorry. And so I appreciate everyone that worked so diligently around that chaos, because the last thing you expect is one of your guest stars to get a positive COVID test, and you have to work around that. So
Did they change the scheduling of the filming days for certain scenes or something? How did that work?
yes. So thank God for my stand-in. I don't remember her name, but she ended up filling in for me the day that I had to leave, because we were already there, on set, ready to go. I was in costume. And then, the COVID team comes running up to me being like, you have to leave. And I was like, oh my gosh. So my wonderful stand-in filled in for me for a day or two. And then they did reschedule a majority of my work. So that happened after I completed my, I think it was 5-day quarantine. I don't remember what the stipulation was. So the only bummer was I missed some of the movie lot days, which are so fun when you're filming at a ranch that has this magical ghost town feel. But I also love filming at the Universal lot. And so we ended up picking up some shots there to be able to fill in the gaps, which was really fun. And Avi, our director, as trams were going by, because we love the fans. Like, thank you for watching the show, thank you for listening to this podcast, and as people were on tours at Universal on these trams, we wave and we wait to film, and Avi, our director, ended up being like, come with me, and as one is passing, he was like, Brave, Disney's Brave 2025. Because I look like the Brave character. My hair was really curly, and I was, in the period garb and all these things. So it was just so funny. But I had a great time there too. So it was really taking a bad situation and turning it into something great. And Avi was amazing working around scheduling and how to creatively fill in the gaps to make everything look consistent. So everyone came together. And that's the beautiful thing about people, especially in this age of artificial intelligence, when people can creatively work out a solution together and have fun doing it and make magic happen. That's just amazing.
Yeah, that's got to be an actor's biggest nightmare. Like, you're on the set of a major TV show, and they say, "Oh, excuse me, yes, you have to leave. Sorry, you got to go."
I was so sad, guys, and not just for me, because I love performing, obviously, but also realizing the impact that has on the rest of the cast and crew, and it was just a bummer. But again, better safe than sorry. I didn't want anyone to get sick, and no one did, at least from me. So, yeah, it all worked out, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Well, aside from those hiccups, can you tell us what it was like to go to that set and sort of immerse yourself in that time period? Because on screen, it looks phenomenal. You really looked like you're back there. So I'm curious to know about like the shooting and that experience.
Yeah. It did feel like we were in 1692 when I came out in hair and makeup and got to step onto the set. We had filmed in the Santa Clarita area, and it just honestly felt magical. And I'm not saying that as a pun of our name or theme, but it really did feel magical. And there was this sort of whimsy to this town that had been built to look like we're in that time period. And for me and my creative process, I really wanted to be in the apothecary. I wanted to see, what she was working on, what props were given, what set decoration. And So again, the set dressers and production designers did a wonderful job. And I really got to feel like I was there because of their work. And that's always helpful for an actor to experience.
That's great, because I think on screen, the only time we see the apothecary is after it's been ransacked by the townspeople. So they actually had it set up for you just for your background. And I guess it was intact at that point.
It was, yeah.
Wow.
So our first few scenes, because I actually have to watch through the window. I'm not sure which edit you guys saw, but I'm watching through the window, and then I come out to end up talking to the crowd.
Yeah.
And so everything's in order, and then they change it all up after it's ransacked. And, that's why those craftsmen are there, to be able to show both sides of the illusion. And they did a great job. Yeah.
On the day that it rained, what was that like?
Oh, well, I wish I could tell you, because that was my day off.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I came back and they were like, it rained.
All right. That's cool. I had a question. It's an old Western set. You said out in Santa Clarita?
I think that's where it was. Somewhere in that area. Yeah.
Is it like going on location, or are there buildings just like off camera that it's like a studio to where you can go and, have lunch and relax in the air conditioning and stuff?
There was both. So we did have our trailers. Like, obviously there was a base camp. There were, I don't know how many functional buildings, but where we filmed were more or less sets that were built that I think stay there for the longevity of that property ownership. So, but yeah, they definitely, it felt like a Western town, and I've been on Westerns before. It felt like a Western town, but how they were able to do costumes and set design really made it feel more like, colonial Massachusetts in the 1600s. You wouldn't feel necessarily like you were filming in California.
I know that you got to do a lot of scenes because you're featured heavily in the episode. Is there any scene in particular that stood out as your favorite? And second part to that question, was there any moment on the set that was unexpected that surprised you?
Oh, okay. Well, I remember what surprised me. The night we had to film our escape, it was very cold and very windy. And I just remember, I say very cold because I have thin blood now, but I know everyone was cold. And when we would come around the corner, the wind would hit us, and we were like, I don't know, snowmen, it felt like, but that was definitely a surprising moment. My favorite scenes, probably one of the scenes when we were jailed together. And there just comes, some beauty in when people, not even just actors, but when people can have real, vulnerable, authentic conversations. And for, my character Morgan has a bit of a tough skin on her, and she's finally starting to be vulnerable. And you have, Ben, who has to kind of hide who he is, but, he's really having empathy. And you have Goody, who's obviously struggling. So just for these characters to really just let their guards down, of all places in jail where they're guarded, I really just loved the vulnerability of those scenes.
Was the jail a soundstage, like a built set?
It was. That was on the lot, on the Universal lot.
That's awesome. It looked really good. How long were you in jail?
How long was I in jail?
Yeah, like the filming day.
Let's see. I think that there were quite a few days. I don't know if it was 2 or 3, but it was definitely more than 1. I think. But also that also may have been one of the things that had to be rescheduled or worked around. I'm forgetting. It felt like we were walking into a cave, and eventually at some point I remember I was like, okay, we're going to the cave and the cave is our friend. Like I was just walking in with that mentality, because there's no sunlight, there's no, you're in a soundstage and then you're in a like dome in a soundstage. So
this episode seemed to have a large guest cast and a lot of townspeople also, like background actors. What was that like with so many people? Because a lot of these episodes, there's only a few people in each scene or something, but it seemed like the whole town was involved with most of the episode. So what was just the feeling of the set with all those people and the organization and the worries of, the writer's strike and the impending actor strike and COVID, all that going on, and still making an amazing episode in the end?
It's incredible that we were able to finish filming. It was amazing having so many people on set, right? That really helps the story come alive. And I'm always so appreciative of extras and the work that they put in, because without them, things would just seem so much more empty and or artificial. And so, so thank you to the extras that were working on set. And there was a recurring joke among some of the cast and crew of like, we don't know if we'll be working tomorrow. And you just never know with these things, right? And I know that everyone was supportive of writers going on strike, and everyone is supportive of actors going on strike, and we're appreciative of IATSE and Teamsters, who were unfortunately very negatively impacted by both strikes, and yet still supported us in those plights for stronger negotiations. And so, so again, thank you to just each union that collaboratively works in TV and film. But yeah, we never knew if our production would keep going or not. And that's because we didn't know how soon the SAG-AFTRA strikes would come, because obviously we had this script already ready to go. So we were going to shoot the script. But if the actors were to have had their strike happen any earlier, then all of production would cease. So essentially it was just kind of waiting on a breath. And fortunately we were able to complete our filming, which was definitely, I consider, a blessing to people who want to work, because we want to work. We love what we do. So, so yeah, that was definitely a trepidatious factor, but it ended up working out.
When you all wrapped, was it like a sense of relief? Like we accomplished it. We did it, actually.
Yes. And I think because of my quarantine, I think I had to do some pickup shots after everyone else had wrapped, if I remember correctly. So we had this big courtroom scene and everyone, all the hugs and all the photos and all that, and it was so great because everyone realizes, you're doing this thing together. And then, it's kind of, if I remember correctly, it was like Avi and I were like, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. So I had a double wrap, the big group cast wrap, and then these other insert shots that we had to do. Mm-hmm. So bonus for me, because when you wrap, it's always fun, and everyone applauds and hugs, and it's always like you're saying bye to family. So it's always fun and sad because it's bittersweet, right? You don't want to wrap, but you're so grateful for the opportunity you've had.
Was this the last project that you were able to do before you had to go on strike?
Yes. Yeah. So acting wise, yes. And now things are just, picking back up within the last month or so. The strike's been suspended. So we'll see what's going to come down the pipeline. I know that there's more writing for me right now. Now that that's been resolved. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what's next. But this was the last thing I filmed before the actors went on strike.
And you being a writer, were you part of the Writers Guild and all that? And but you could still perform because you were acting, right?
So for writers in the WGA, obviously, once the writers' strike was underway, you can no longer put any pen to paper or type anything out for the AMPTP. And so anything that already had a contract underway or a final script, you're able to shoot that. And that's how, with Margarita's wonderful script, we were able to film, because she had already done this amazing job and completed her work for that episode, and we could just roll with it. Obviously, once the actors had their strike, we could no longer perform on AMPTP productions. But as a SAG-AFTRA actor working on a WGA script, I could still perform on that script because it had already been completed. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I followed you.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Because
Hopefully
we wonder
I didn't
about
bore
those
people
things.
to death with that description.
Well, being a writer and a director yourself, when you're on a set, are you just like constantly learning like different things maybe for you to do in the future for your writing or directing? I noticed you wrote Tom and Jerry, right? How cool is that? I think we all watched that as a kid and loved that.
Yeah, I was one of their writers for the Tom and Jerry show reboot, and then Tom and Jerry in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how that fell into my lap a little bit, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity, but I also didn't really have a passion for animation writing. I actually prefer narrative live action films and television, and so it was just a great learning experience to see how different animation writing is. The format's different, the writing room is different, I should say the lack of writing room. And the unions are different. Actually, animation writing is currently under the Animation Guild instead of the WGA, which is also interesting. And so, yeah, it was just a learning experience. And per your question of how I observe other occupations in my line of work, yeah, every human experience, you can learn something. And I think I'd have to probably be like a clinical narcissist not to be like, I'm not going to learn from that person. You know? I already know everything. So, yeah, I know I fully embrace I don't know everything. And there are people with great expertise that I've had the pleasure of working with. And I love learning from people and their vision for their own occupation. And so we'll see if I end up doing more directing as well. I don't know. But right now, a majority of my time is acting and writing, and those are quite fulfilling.
It sounds like you had fun filming the episode. What's your biggest takeaway from your time on Quantum Leap?
Biggest takeaway. It's always a delight working with people who love what they do. And everyone was so welcoming, because when you're a guest star, you're stepping into another show where people have kind of a rhythm, and, they see each other every day for months at a time. And, sometimes it's hit or miss whether you feel like you'll be able to be included in that kind of family vibe or not. And you just take whatever the circumstances are with stride. But this show was just so welcoming, so kind, and everyone was just, even amidst all the chaos and all the crazy factors that happened, everyone made it work. And it was just such a positive experience.
Do you have any upcoming? I know there was a strike, so probably not. But are you currently working on anything or upcoming stuff that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, let me figure out how much I can say.
Okay.
I am currently in development on a couple of indie feature films and on a new TV show. We are going to see how it goes, because there's a lot of meetings involved and different networks and figuring out what's the best fit and contracts. So I'm in the middle of going through that stage with more of my scripts. But I will say on each of the scripts I've written, there's normally a character that I like to play. Isn't always the lead. Sometimes supporting characters are more fun for me, and sometimes the leads are. So we'll just see which of these 3 projects will we'll see which one takes off soon enough.
So we can rest assured we'll see you somewhere in the near future.
Yes.
So
oh yes, yeah.
That's good news for Quantum Leap fans. Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other tales from the set that we haven't touched upon? Aspects of your filming that you'd like to relate, and or any messages for the leapers out there that are listening?
Well, I think I would just love to end by saying thank you to all of these leapers for all of your support. And, obviously any job in entertainment can't succeed without its fans. And so we really appreciate your support and views and listens and all the things. So thank you. Thank you to you guys. And thank you to the fans.
Amanda Jaros, thank you so much for being on the Quantum Leap podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.